What if Samson never lost his strength? Picture a man with a vow braided into his hair, muscles like a legend, standing in the torchlit doorway of a Philistine hall. The rulers inside are waiting for a spectacle, a humiliated Israelite to amuse the crowd. But in this timeline, the pillars don't fall, the laughter never turns to dust, and Samson doesn't die in the rubble. Instead, the doors swing open to a new path, one where strength keeps breathing and history keeps bending. Before we step into that alternate path, let's lay out the story as it's told. The Book of Judges introduces a pattern in ancient Israel. People fall into trouble, cry out, and a judge arises to rescue them. Samson is the thunderclap of that pattern. His birth is announced by a messenger, his life set apart by a Nazarite vow: no wine, no unclean food, and, most famously, no razor on his head. His strength isn't just muscle, it's tied to this lifelong promise. Samson grows up as a one-man border storm. He tears a lion as if it were cloth. He snaps ropes like threads. He carries a city gate on his shoulders. His personal feuds bleed into national conflicts with the Philistines, the coastal people pressing inland with hard iron and new trade. Then comes Delilah. The Philistine leaders want to find the secret of Samson's strength. Delilah asks. Samson plays with the answer: fresh cords, new ropes, weaving his hair into a loom. Finally, he tells her the truth. The hair isn't just hair, it's a sign of his vow. In the night, she cuts it. He wakes, captive and blind. He's taken to Gaza. They make him grind grain. Later, at a great festival to their god, they bring him out for entertainment. His hair has started to grow back. He prays one last prayer. He leans on two pillars. He bows. The building collapses, and Samson dies with his enemies. The text says he killed more in his death than in his life. That's the canon many of us know. But our question is gentle and curious. What if that moment never happened? What if Samson never revealed his secret? What if Delilah never succeeded? What if Samson never lost his strength? Let's adjust one hinge of the story. The night is the same. The whispering questions, the quiet breathing of a house that feels too calm. But Samson's caution wins out. He looks at Delilah, listens to the rhythm of a trap being set, and keeps the vow in his heart like a locked chest. No secret leaves his lips. She tries again. The rulers wait again. But the betrayal never lands. Morning comes. Samson rises, still strong. Word spreads through the Philistine towns that the plan has failed. Their lords, who were ready to pay, now worry. If Samson cannot be tamed by ropes, by ambush, or by love turned into a knife, what can they do? Samson slips away from Delilah's house and returns to the borderlands. But something in him has changed. Not his strength, but his strategy. The near miss with captivity leaves him more watchful. Imagine him now, not just as a whirlwind, but as a leader who can pause. He begins to do what the text hints he struggled with. He calls the tribes. In the hills, in the valleys, fires crackle at night as messengers run. Dan, Judah, Benjamin. Leaders gather not to crown a king, but to cooperate. They've seen Samson fight alone. Now they see what he can do when others stand with him. Small outposts on ridgelines become stations where scouts watch the coastal road. The Philistines still hold their fortified cities: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, and Ekron. But the easy raids up the slopes? Those start to evaporate. In this timeline, Samson lives into the role of judge longer than 2 decades, because his life doesn't end in the rubble of a temple. He remains a symbol, but a breathing one. The Philistines adapt. Traders focus on sea routes and avoid the hills where patrols now coordinate. Israel doesn't conquer the coast, but the fear of sudden invasion drops. The pressure in the highlands eases, and life does what life loves to do. It grows. That shift triggers ripples. Philistines held a crucial advantage in iron, shaping the tools and weapons of a new age. In our alternate path, the monopoly cracks earlier. Some of this is simple commerce. A quieter frontier allows traders to barter, blacksmiths to learn, and metalworkers to migrate inland. The first plowshares of better iron begin to turn Israel's soil more efficiently. Harvests grow heavier. Families feel the difference at the table. Where there's food security, there's time. Time to build better storage, to teach children to read marks on clay, to remember and write. Schools of scribes, which may have developed later, now find soil earlier. You can almost see them, young apprentices in a small village near Shiloh, smoothing a shard and practicing letters by oil lamp. Words begin to knit a wider identity around the tribes. And Shiloh, yes, let's talk about Shiloh. In the standard timeline, Shiloh's sanctuary is a central place where the Ark of the Covenant dwells, a visible symbol of faith. And later, it becomes a place of grief. The Philistine pressure in Samuel's time leads to battles, where the Ark is carried into the field and captured. That event scars the national memory. But with Samson holding Philistine power in check, the temptation to use the Ark as a battle talisman might never rise the same way. Shiloh keeps its dignity. The sanctuary remains a quiet spine of worship rather than a flashpoint for war. Imagine the old priest Eli living out his days without hearing the shock of defeat in the distance. Imagine Samuel, still dedicated, still listening in the night, growing up in a steadier Shiloh. Instead of rallying Israel under the thunder of crisis, he shepherds a people whose borders, while not perfect, are calmer. Now the big question, the monarchy. In the original Ark, Israel eventually asks for a king, like the nations. They want unity and a sword against enemies. In our timeline, that desire still exists. Humans crave order, legacy, a name on a banner, but it's born in a different climate. The Philistines aren't the same looming shadow. The request for a king becomes less about survival and more about administration. Instead of a rushed choice born of fear, we might see a season of debate. Which tribe? Why now? How do we protect the unique identity of a people led by divine law, not just royal decree? Would Saul still be chosen? Maybe not. His selection in the canonical world leans heavily on his stature and the moment's urgency. In a calmer era, charisma and height matter less. Wisdom, experience, and the ability to harmonize 12 tribes matter more. The crown, if it comes, might find a head less for battlefield shock and more for steady hands. And what about David? Without Philistine dominance, the duel in the valley of Elah may never happen. The giant named Goliath, that walking headline, doesn't define anyone's future. David's gifts still exist: music, poetry, courage, but their stage shifts. Picture him not as a sudden hero with a sling, but as a rising court musician, a poet who organizes choirs at Shiloh, a diplomat who helps neighboring towns settle disputes. The Psalms still bloom, but their tone leans, perhaps, more toward gratitude for slow stability than relief from overwhelming fear. Remove one duel, and you rewrite 1,000 stories told around campfires. You also change how enemy nations see Israel. Without the public spectacle of a shepherd defeating a champion, neighboring peoples perceive Israel less as a surprise phenomenon and more as a steady confederation that learned, early, to check its nearest threat. This isn't a golden age. Calm simply reveals the next set of challenges. Trade means foreign goods, foreign ideas, foreign gods folded into bundles on donkey backs. The road brings wealth, and with wealth comes the question: who are we when life is easier? Prophets, those guardians of identity, still stand up to speak, but their tone adjusts. Less, do not fear, and more, do not forget. Less about rescue from enemies, and more about faithfulness in prosperity. A different kind of warning, just as urgent. Meanwhile, the tribe of Dan, the tribe of Samson, feels the change. In the canonical path, Dan struggles with territory, and, in some accounts, migrates north. Here, with Philistine pressure eased earlier, Dan can hold the low hills south of the coastal plain. The map of tribal lands looks more anchored. Fewer migrations mean fewer resentments that come from displacement. The social fabric tightens. As strength persists in Samson, strength grows around him. Young men and women witness a living judge who kept his vow and learned restraint. The Nazarite tradition doesn't become universal, but it becomes admired. Parents tell their children a different ending, not a blind man bowing in a final blaze, but an older leader mentoring the next generation. Imagine Samson in his later years, hair silvered but long, sitting beneath an oak, listening more than speaking. He tells a hot-headed teenager, strength is a tool, A vow is a compass. In a world of iron, a sentence like that can cut straighter than any blade. At the coast, Philistine cities adapt to this new normal. They lean harder into the sea, into trade with islands and ports, into pottery and dyes and the art of survival without expansion. Their leaders are pragmatic. A morning without war can be profitable. Treaties quietly emerge along the frontier. Agreements about wells, about pastures, about market days where salt and fish meet grain and wool. Tensions flare, yes. Spears still flash sometimes. But the escalator to total war breaks down more often than it runs. What does the wider region look like as centuries wheel forward? When Assyria rises, as it historically did, it meets an Israel shaped by earlier cohesion. Not necessarily stronger than empires, Assyria was a storm no hill country could easily stop, but better at information, alliances, and identity. An Israel that practiced unity sooner can sometimes negotiate better, resist longer, or, when it must, survive exile with a deeper memory of its core. Stories preserved by earlier scribes become lifelines later. Paradoxically, a Samson who lives may help a people endure when he's long gone. Now pause and consider the lessons lost and gained. In our canonical world, Samson's final act is a paradox, tragic and triumphant, destructive and redemptive. It teaches that failure isn't the end of the story, that a broken vow can be met with a final cry of trust. Remove that, and we lose a particular mirror we hold up to human weakness and mercy. But we gain a different mirror, the long practice of leadership, the idea that a gift can mature over time, not just flash brightly once. Around family tables in this alternate timeline, the story parents tell at night sounds different. There was once a judge who was very strong, they begin, as strong as a storm. But what made him great wasn't only his strength. It was that he learned to use it well and to share it. Children listen, their eyes big at the idea of a hero who doesn't burn out. That story shapes how they see their own gifts. Fewer fireworks, more steady light. At the temple precinct of Shiloh, the music changes too. Choirs sing about fields that yielded, about borders held, about wisdom learned. There's pageantry, yes, but it's not built on the memory of a colonnade falling. It's built on the memory of a man who didn't tell a secret, who didn't fall into a trap, who lived long enough to hand off the work to those coming after him. Here's a moment to bring you in. Which ripple intrigues you most? The calmer border that changes the monarchy's birth, or the new story parents tell about strength and wisdom? Share your thoughts below, and if you'd enjoy more respectful what-ifs like this, join our channel for the next adventure. If you could step into this alternate Israel, you'd notice smaller things first. The markets. The iron blades stacked by a smith who learned his craft from a traveler once afraid to cross the hills. A farmer tracing neat lines in a field with a better plow. A girl reciting her letters faster because her mother learned to read. The soldiers who, in peacetime, spend part of their week repairing terraces and aqueducts. Ordinary goodness multiplies when fear loosens its grip. And then the larger currents. Without the shock of the ark's capture, national confidence develops fewer cracks. Without the showdown of David and Goliath, courage becomes less theatrical and more communal. People tell their children, "We stand together." Not only, we cheer for the champion. Samson's legend still travels, but it travels alongside the names of quiet leaders, judges of small towns, negotiators at borders, teachers in sanctuaries, who shape a culture that prizes constancy. Theologically, the message shifts but remains tender. The people don't stop believing in deliverance, they just learn to recognize it in steady seasons. The prophets still point beyond human strength to something higher, but they do it through parables of good harvests and honest waits in the marketplace, not only through rescue at the last second. The story of a vow kept feels less like a cautionary tale about breaking it, and more like an invitation to live it. Does this erase conflict? Not at all. The human heart isn't simplified by a safer border. Pride still lurks. Power still tempts. Samson himself, even wiser, would still have to wrestle with the old impulses, to prove, to flash, to settle scores. Our alternate path depends on him growing in restraint, and that is a fragile hope. A single night could still undo much. That tension keeps the timeline honest. It isn't a utopia, it's simply a gentler slope. As centuries pass, the map keeps changing. Empires rise, languages shift, but the early choices echo. A people who practiced writing sooner preserve more. A people who learned cooperation under a living judge become better at councils. A sanctuary that wasn't shamed by a lost ark remains a North Star for a longer stretch. And the legend of the man with uncut hair becomes not a tragedy, but a testament. Power, guided by promise. Now step back with me. Why do what-ifs like this matter? Because they help us notice the joints of history, the small hinges that swing big doors. They teach us to look at our own lives and ask gentle questions. What promises guide my strength? Where could I trade one dazzling moment for a lifetime of steady good? We aren't judges in ancient Israel, but we have strength to spend. And the way we spend it reshapes the maps around us. Families, neighborhoods, communities. In the end, whether the pillars stand or fall in our stories, the wonder remains in the telling and in the listening. Our scenario is speculative, not doctrinal, a respectful sketch to make us think. In one world, a blind man's last prayer shakes the ground. In another, a wise man's long leadership steadies it. Both worlds ask us to consider the same question. What is strength for? So we close our eyes and picture the final scene. Samson, older now, walking a ridge at dusk. He pauses where he once stood as a young man. The wind moves his hair. Below, lanterns bloom in farmyards. Somewhere, the quiet music of a sanctuary floats on the air. He smiles, not because he won, but because the people did. He turns back toward the village, a judge going home, and the timeline hums with a gentle, enduring hope.